that song is actually about the fear of intimacy, and so it does have a sexual connotation to it, meaning that it's to keep the lights off. I don't want to be seen. And although it is it's in that tone or that context that song was put together, intimacy is one of the biggest fears I think that we have. DJ Mike B and I were speaking right before he left, and we're talking about fear, and all fear comes down to the fear of dying. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the end of a physical life. I see fear as being something that we're just afraid of our image, that mask. If we're seen, so to speak, when it comes to fear of intimacy, to be seen is going to it's going to be the death of who you were trying to portray yourself as. It's the death of that persona that you want people to think that that is you. And I was listening to his show prior to coming on the air, and really about choosing. It's about choice. It's choosing to be us. It's really getting to our truth. As I mentioned, when I first came on, I had just come from having coffee with a friend. And one of the things that I told her was that over the years, I have learned I don't buy into anybody's agenda. I don't care where I work. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, I understand we have schedules. I know we have expectations. But at the same time, I will choose me before anything else. And yes, I understand that there are entities and establishments and so forth that have us living in this fear that if we choose us over them, something bad will happen. It'll be the death of something, whether it be the death of a job. Okay, so it all comes back to that fear of dying, like DJ Mike B and I were talking about. So really, how is fear affecting your life, my life? How are we engaged in it? And again, it's a survival mechanism, okay? So sometimes there's a legitimate concern, but when we're not aware of how much it is impacting us and how much it is controlling, we're allowing somebody else's belief system, somebody else's desire, somebody else's thought to regulate our actions. Maybe it's the fear of offending somebody. Maybe it's the fear of losing something. Again, I'm very present to the idea of that it all comes down to the fear of dying, and but I don't necessarily, like I said, feel like that's just a literal thing, like we're going to come to a physical death. There's a lot of deaths that we encounter on a regular basis, whether it be the death of a relationship, the death of a job. It could be maybe death is too much or it's too intense of a word, but it's going to be the end of something. And one of the things that I've done throughout my life with my kids is teach them that there's a consequence for everything. It doesn't necessarily mean that consequence is not necessarily bad. Consequence is just the result. It's just the outcome. So we can have, well, in so many ways, you could say it's a good or bad outcome, right? But ultimately, if we can wrap our hearts around the idea of everything happens, it's all conspiring in our favor. It's all a matter of how we look at it. And we're choosing to look at it as, the way we look at something is our choice. We can choose to see the benefit. We can choose to get the learning experience. And we may not like the learning experience, but it's about having an experience. It's about learning about ourselves. And fear really puts us in touch with ourselves. We get to explore. Yes, there's things that have occurred throughout our life that potentially would have us be afraid. But ultimately, later on in the set of music, I have, that famous line, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Because if you think about it, that thing that we're afraid of, or those things, or those experiences that we're afraid of, that fear is ultimately stopping us. And if we're allowing somebody else to infuse us with fear, to impose their beliefs, then we are not necessarily their fear, but we're allowing their thoughts to scare us into making a different decision other than what would make more sense for us. Again, a good example is calling in sick for a job. How many places actually have where you're only allowed to have so many sick days? One of the biggest arguments that I have, greatest gripes, I'm going to say it that way, is around the aspect of mental health. People can call in sick for a cold if they want to say that they've been throwing up in the bathroom or they have a fever. That's allowable. But if you say, I'm having a panic attack, you got to find a way to get to work. That's not okay. And so we have there's a definition. You can have a sick day or you can have a personal day. And you're only allowed to have so many personal days, or you're only allowed to have so many sick days. Now, I'm not saying milk it. I'm not saying take advantage or be abusive. But we live in fear of, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how many people I know that have had a serious ailment that required more than just a week, 7 sick days or however many sick days their place of work allowed. It took much longer than that. So then there's the fear of, well, I'm not going to have the money to make this truck payment. I'm not going to have the money to do this. So and while we can say that these fears are legitimate, they're real. What if we began just to choose us? Maybe this circumstance, maybe these things are presenting themselves in our life because, in essence, we're being guided in a different direction. That's a distinct possibility. I hear stories all the time, my own included, where we all encounter like massive breakdowns in our life, massive, to the point where we were actually forced out of a situation or out of a location. Just literally, just felt like we were just pushed out. Not that there's anything wrong with where we were, not yet. Not that there was anything wrong, definitively wrong, where we could sit there and just list out all of the problems. It just, because other people maybe are existing just fine in that same situation or that same location. And so we sit back and we go, well, how come I can't be there? How come I can't do this? Why is this happening to me? How many times have we had those questions? And so then we find ourselves being afraid of, well, we're not doing enough. We're not adequate enough. We're not good enough. We have, again, big fears. And so we ultimately try to force it. Many times we try to force the situation to try to make it work. And it still doesn't work. And we find more breakdown and more breakdown. And one of the things about breakdown is it's an opportunity. A breakdown isn't a bad thing. It's our judgment of how we see it. We choose to see something good or bad. It's a judgment. That's all good or bad is. It's a judgment. And as I mentioned earlier, what if we actually saw everything as working in our favor? So if we're in a situation or we're in a location where we're in a relationship, and maybe you are getting consistently sick at work, and you're potentially facing losing your job, what if it's actually because that place is stressing you out? What if that place is actually environmentally affecting you to the point where you are, maybe it's mental, emotional. It could very well be there's a sub-thought in there that says, I don't want to be here, but yet you're trying to make it happen because, well, you need the money. Now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with health? Because this is the Remedial Mystic Show, right? Well, this has a lot to do with health. Not just because you're getting sick at work, but because it's ultimately how we operate as a system. And so those little sub-thoughts are significant when it comes to the way we choose our choices. Choose our choices. And so if you are in a situation that you really don't want to be in, and if you were, again, to take yourself, excuse yourself, spend time by yourself. One of the things that I know I've noticed a lot, and it's becoming increasingly so, we're afraid to be alone. What does it mean to be alone? The fear of being alone. This is where, the habitual bouncing from relationship to relationship. I can't stay home at night by myself. I don't like to, we're afraid to be alone. Because ultimately to be alone means we have to be alone with our thoughts. How is that affecting you? Where if we can, being alone isn't a bad thing. It's actually quite a good thing. It's a relationship with yourself. And the clearer you are with yourself, and the kinder you are to yourself, the more understanding you are with yourself. And taking that time with yourself just to be, okay, if you want to have music on, you can have music on. But be alone with yourself. Be alone with those thoughts. Really get to the bottom of what it is you want. And noticing, like when you're getting ready for work, or you're getting ready to go out with this person that you've been in a relationship with that you don't really want to be in a relationship with. It doesn't have to be a brutal ending. But what about honesty? I heard a great, the ending of a relationship, I've never heard anybody describe it as I heard this morning, is a really cool thing. Because it's an opportunity for something new. Again, a breakdown is not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to create something new. So the end of a relationship is an opportunity to reconnect with yourself and be clear about more about what it is you're looking for. If you're working somewhere that you really don't want to be at, listen to that thought. That thought keeps coming up for a reason. Don't be afraid of that thought. Now you might be thinking, well, then what am I supposed to do? Well, if you actually just, it doesn't have to be hasty. Doesn't have to be a hasty decision like I got to end that relationship tonight, or I got to quit my job this afternoon. It's not about that. It's about realizing that the fear of that idea is impacting your decisions. It's affecting your health if you're calling in sick all the time. So maybe it's time to spend time with yourself, to be honest with yourself, to empower yourself. To give yourself permission is another way to say it. Give yourself permission to do what feels right for you. These are the fears that I'm talking about. This fear of intimacy, as I mentioned with Dance in the Dark, it doesn't have to be a sexual intimacy. Intimacy is looking somebody in the eye. How many times have you actually sat with somebody and actually looked them in the eye when they were speaking with you? Not to you or at you, but with you. How often do you actually speak with somebody, or are you just talking at them? I have had plenty of experiences, again, where people just talk at me. There's no connection. They're so afraid of being seen that they just almost bulldoze you with words. Ideas. This is how it is. There's no inquiry. There's no I want to get to know you kind of thing. It's just like, hey, this is how it is. This is who I am. And and you just become inundated with information. It becomes overwhelming because they're so afraid of being seen. Or maybe we're afraid of being seen. If we're the ones, maybe we do funny things. Maybe we don't look people in the eye when they're speaking with us. That being seen puts an end to the facade that we've been putting out there. Exposes our vulnerabilities. It creates a connection. Intimacy creates a connection. If just eye to eye, it creates that connection. Because have you ever looked somebody in the eye and realized that you get them? You just get them. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be a romantic thing. It could be somebody that you just met for the first time, and it's like, wow, I really dig you. Or, hey, wow, I'm not so sure I want to be here. You see what I'm saying? It can go either way. It's not just necessarily about an attraction. It could be about like, oh no, this isn't a good match. This is not an alignment of energy. I would benefit to step away. That's what intimacy provides. It gives us choices. But when we don't create that connection, then we don't have the choice. Then we're just reacting to what we think we're supposed to be doing or what we think is expected of us. Not everybody, there's almost 8 billion people on this planet. There's no way we're all going to like one another. There's not an alignment with everybody. You know, we're meant to be connected with some people. We're meant to interact with some people. There's people on this planet you're never going to meet. It's not going to undermine your life. It's not going to enhance your life by not meeting people. But the people that we do get to encounter, I had somebody the other day say to me at the restaurant, you do this because you're here to make the money. Actually, no, I'm there to meet people. I'm there to experience myself. I totally dig it. And there's times when you can look at somebody and go, this is not somebody that I would work well with. I've had people accuse me of just not liking people for just no apparent reason. I can't say that I don't like the person. I'm sure the person is probably a really cool person with other people. It's just our energy didn't align. But when we don't, especially in my own case, when I don't allow myself to be seen, I hide that. I deny actually other people the opportunity to make that choice. The fear of being alone. So we try to control people in the sense that if we don't make eye contact and we can keep this facade going, people might be around us longer. We can have friends, because if we're afraid we're not likable or we're afraid we're not lovable, we feel like we're not worthy of a friendship. See, these are all big fears. And so what we do is we manipulate people, not maliciously. Unknowingly, we are manipulating people to bring them in. And then it's funny because then all of a sudden you start getting involved with these people and doing things with them. And the next thing you hear yourself say, maybe a month later or a couple of years later, like, I just can't be friends with this person anymore. I just don't like the way they do this and this, So we create almost false relationships out of this fear of being alone. Being human is a very interesting thing. And I find it very fascinating. And I also find that I find it fascinating the way our fears actually influence the way we just act. It's not even about words. It's the way we act. And so taking time to actually look around you to see what relationships you've established and how they were established and how many of them actually feel concrete, solid. Like, yes, this is like a friend for life. This is definitely somebody I'm going to, in my life, the rest of my life. Or just somebody who just aggravates the fool out of you because it was created under false pretenses, because you didn't really let them, because think about it, when you get into a relationship and all of a sudden they see you, that's when stuff starts to fall apart. You start to have more and more breakdowns. So learning how to realize, just accepting the fact that you're afraid to be seen, and to begin taking steps. I guess the first place to start would be with yourself. getting to know yourself. And that's where the being alone thing comes in, to take that time to be vulnerable with yourself and really explore what it is that would make your heart smile and would really allow you to have the connection that you deserve. I don't know how many times I wonder how many people actually feel like they deserve a quality relationship, a quality, a job that honors them, a place that honors them, just on and on and on. And so these fears that we hold about ourselves, about not being good enough, and what we might lose if we actually do show up. Up next, I got a song for you by Tim McGraw titled Live Like You Are Dying.